When I was working with patients at my clinic, there was a woman who came to see me every week for nearly 2 years. 2 years. She would sit in that chair across from me and tell me all the reasons why her life couldn't change. She had a story for everything. Why she couldn't find love. Why money always slipped through her fingers. Why opportunities went to everyone else. And here's what haunted me most, what kept me up at night long after she'd leave my office. Every single reason she gave me was logical, reasonable. It made perfect sense on the surface. But beneath those reasons, buried so deep she couldn't even see them herself, were programs. Programs that had been installed in her mind before she could even speak, before she had any choice in the matter. Programs that told her exactly who she was allowed to be, how much she was allowed to have, and what she was allowed to become. And those programs, my friend, those invisible instructions running in the background of her consciousness, they were destroying her life, one decision at a time. Now I want you to think about something uncomfortable for a moment. What if I told you that right now, as you're listening to these words, there are programs running inside your subconscious mind that were designed specifically to keep you small, to keep you struggling, to keep you from ever accessing the power that is your birthright? What if the reason you keep hitting the same walls, facing the same problems, attracting the same situations over and over again, has nothing to do with bad luck or the world being against you, and everything to do with code that was written into your mental software before you were 7 years old? I know that sounds dramatic. I know it might even sound impossible. But I'm going to prove it to you. And more importantly, I'm going to show you exactly how to rewrite those programs so that you can finally step into the life you were meant to live. Because here's the truth that most people will never discover. You weren't born to struggle. You weren't born to fail. But you were programmed that way. Let me be very clear about what we're going to do together in this time we have. This isn't just another motivational talk where I tell you to think positive and everything will magically work out. I've spent decades studying the subconscious mind, working with thousands of people, and what I've learned is this. You can have all the willpower in the world, all the positive thoughts, all the goal setting and vision boards and affirmations, and still end up exactly where you started if you don't understand one fundamental truth. Your subconscious mind is running the show. It's making about 95% of your decisions. It's controlling your habits, your reactions, your beliefs about what's possible for you. And if that subconscious mind has been programmed with failure codes, with limitation beliefs, with instructions that say you're not good enough or smart enough or worthy enough, then no amount of conscious effort is going to set you free. It's like trying to run new software on a computer that has a virus. The virus wins every time. So what I'm going to give you today is the antivirus. I'm going to show you exactly where these programs came from, how to identify which ones are running in your mind right now, and most importantly, the precise techniques I used with my patients and that I've used in my own life to completely rewrite the code, to install new programs of success, abundance, love, health, and possibility. By the time we're done, you're going to see your entire life differently. You're going to understand why certain patterns keep repeating. You're going to recognize the invisible hand that's been steering your ship, and you're going to have the tools to take back control. To become the programmer instead of the program, that's my promise to you. So stay with me. Every word matters. Every example I share contains a key. And if you apply what I'm about to teach you, your life will never be the same. Now let me take you back to something that happened to me when I was first beginning to understand these principles. I had been studying the mind for years at this point, reading everything I could get my hands on, working with people in my ministry, but there was still something I couldn't quite grasp. I could see the power of the subconscious mind. I could see how belief shaped reality. But I couldn't understand why some people seemed completely unable to change their beliefs no matter what evidence was presented to them, no matter how much they consciously wanted something different. There was a man I'll call Robert. He came to me because he was drowning in debt. Every time he would get ahead, something would happen. An unexpected expense, a bad investment, a job loss. It was like clockwork. And Robert would say to me, "You see, Dr. Murphy, I'm just unlucky with money. It's always been this way. My father was the same. His father was the same. We're just not money people." Now, intellectually, Robert knew this was nonsense. He knew plenty of people who came from nothing and built wealth. He knew his family history didn't have to be his destiny. but knowing something consciously and believing it subconsciously are two completely different universes. So I started asking Robert about his childhood. What did your parents say about money? What did you hear growing up? And slowly, like watching a photograph develop, the programs started to reveal themselves. His mother used to say, "We may not have much, but at least we're honest." The implication being that wealthy people were dishonest. His father would say, "Money is the root of all evil, and those rich folks don't care about anyone but themselves." His grandmother told him that people like us don't get those kinds of opportunities, that's for other people, people who are different from us. By the time Robert was 10 years old, his subconscious mind had been programmed with a complete operating system around money. And that operating system said, money is bad. Wealthy people are bad. If you have money, you're not one of us. You'll lose your identity. You'll lose your family's love. You'll become something evil. Now here's what made this so insidious. None of these beliefs were stated directly. No one sat Robert down and said, "I'm now going to install a poverty program in your mind." It happened through repetition, through emotion, through the authority of the people he loved and trusted most. And by the time he was an adult, these beliefs were so deep, so fundamental to his sense of identity, that his subconscious mind would literally sabotage any attempt to accumulate wealth in order to keep him safe, to keep him aligned with his tribe, to keep him being who he was programmed to believe he was. That's when I truly understood. We're not dealing with bad luck or lack of opportunity or even lack of effort. We're dealing with programming, with code. And unless you learn to access that code and rewrite it, you'll keep running the same programs over and over again, wondering why nothing ever changes. The tragedy is that most people live their entire lives never realizing they're not actually living their own life. They're living out a script that was written by other people. Parents, teachers, religious leaders, society, culture, all of these voices combine to create a set of instructions about who you are and what you're capable of. And those instructions are running every single day, beneath your awareness, making your choices for you. Let me give you another example because I want this to really land. I worked with a young woman, brilliant mind, incredibly talented artist. She would create the most beautiful paintings, pour her soul into them, but she could never show them to anyone. They would sit in her apartment, stacked against the walls, unseen. When I asked her why she didn't exhibit her work or try to sell it, she said something that broke my heart. She said, "Who am I to think my art matters? There are real artists out there. Important people. I'm nobody. I'm just someone who paints in her apartment." Now, where do you think that program came from? We traced it back. When she was 8 years old, she came home excited about a drawing she'd made in school. She showed it to her father, beaming with pride. And her father, who was probably just tired after a long day at work, barely glanced at it and said, "That's nice, honey, but you should focus on your math. You need practical skills if you're going to make it in the real world. Art is fine as a hobby, but it's not for people like us." One comment, one moment, but it came from her father, someone whose opinion meant everything to her. And in that moment, a program was installed. Art is not valuable. Your creative expression doesn't matter. You need to be practical. You're not the kind of person whose art is important. And that program ran for 30 years. 30 years. This brilliant soul dimming her light, hiding her gifts, living a life of quiet desperation in an office job she hated, all because of code that was written into her subconscious mind when she was 8 years old. Now I want you to stop for a moment and think about your own life. What programs might be running in your mind right now? What beliefs about yourself, about what you're capable of, about what you deserve, might have been installed before you had any say in the matter? Maybe you were told you're too sensitive, you're too loud, you're not smart like your brother, you're not pretty like your sister, money doesn't grow on trees, life is hard and then you die. Who do you think you are? Don't get too big for your britches. Better safe than sorry. Good things don't happen to people like us. Every single one of these statements, if repeated enough times with enough emotion, becomes a program. It gets written into your subconscious mind, and once it's there, it runs automatically. You don't question it. You don't examine it. It simply becomes the lens through which you see reality. It becomes the filter that determines what you notice, what you ignore, what you believe is possible, and what you believe is off limits. This is why positive thinking alone doesn't work. You can stand in front of a mirror and say, "I am wealthy," 1,000 times, But if your subconscious mind has been programmed with the belief that money is evil or that you don't deserve abundance, it will find a way to maintain the status quo. The subconscious mind's primary job is to keep you safe and consistent with your identity. If your identity says, "I am a person who struggles with money," then your subconscious will make absolutely certain you continue to struggle with money. Not because it hates you, but because it's trying to protect you. It's trying to keep you aligned with what it believes to be true about who you are. I remember one evening sitting in my study, reading case files from my patients, and being struck by how many different forms these programs took. For some people it was about money, for others it was about love. I had patients who were programmed to believe they would always be sick, others who believed they could never be successful, still others who believed they didn't deserve happiness. And in every single case, when we dug deep enough, we found the moment or series of moments when the program was installed. The child who was repeatedly told she was sickly, who grew up to have mysterious illnesses doctors couldn't explain. The boy who was abandoned by his father and programmed to believe he was unlovable, who grew up to sabotage every relationship just when it was getting good. The teenager who was told she wasn't college material, who then spent her adult life in jobs far beneath her capabilities, never applying for anything better because deep down she believed she wasn't capable of more. These weren't character flaws. This wasn't laziness, or lack of ambition, or bad decision-making at the conscious level. This was programming, pure and simple. And the most heartbreaking part? Most of these people had no idea it was happening. They thought this was just who they were. This was just their lot in life. They had no idea they were running someone else's software. So here's the question that matters more than anything else. If you were programmed without your consent, without your knowledge, before you had the consciousness to choose, can you be reprogrammed? Can those old codes be deleted and new ones installed? And the answer that I've spent my entire life proving is yes, absolutely yes. But not through willpower, not through positive thinking alone, not through just trying harder or wanting it more. You have to go deeper. You have to access the subconscious mind directly. You have to learn its language. And you have to systematically replace the old programs with new ones through specific techniques that bypass the critical factor of your conscious mind. That's what I'm going to teach you. The methods I've used successfully with thousands of people, the same methods I use in my own life every single day. But before we get to the how, you need to understand something crucial. These programs weren't installed by accident. They weren't random. There's a specific reason your subconscious mind accepted them so completely. And once you understand that reason, everything else will make sense. When you were born, you came into this world as pure potential. No limiting beliefs. No stories about what you could or couldn't do. No programs about whether you were worthy or capable or deserving. You were a blank slate, an empty hard drive waiting for information. And for the first several years of your life, you were in what scientists call a hypnotic state. Your brain waves were operating primarily in theta, the same state adults enter during deep meditation or hypnosis. In this state, you had no filters, no critical faculty to reject what you were told. You absorbed everything like a sponge absorbs water. When your father said, "Money doesn't grow on trees," your subconscious didn't debate it. It recorded it as fact. When your mother said, "You're just like your lazy uncle," your subconscious didn't question whether that was true or fair. It filed it away as identity. When your teacher said, "You're not good at math," your subconscious didn't analyze her credentials or consider that maybe she was just having a bad day. It accepted it as your permanent limitation. And here's what makes this so insidious. These programs didn't just shape your thoughts, they shaped your neurology. Every repeated thought, every repeated belief, carved neural pathways in your brain like water carving canyons in stone. The more a belief was repeated, the deeper the pathway became, until it turned into a superhighway of automatic thinking. This is why you can consciously want financial abundance, while subconsciously sabotaging every opportunity that comes your way. This is why you can set goals with genuine enthusiasm on January 1st and abandon them by January 15th. This is why you can know intellectually that you deserve love while feeling unworthy in your bones. Your subconscious isn't trying to hurt you, it's trying to protect you by keeping you consistent with the identity it learned in childhood. If your subconscious believes you're not the type of person who succeeds, then success becomes a threat to your identity, and your subconscious will do whatever it takes to return you to the familiar version of yourself, even if that version is miserable. But here's the beautiful truth that changes everything. The same mechanism that programmed you can reprogram you. The subconscious mind doesn't distinguish between a real experience and a vividly imagined one. It responds to repetition, emotion, and consistency. And that means you have the power to install new software. You can override 40 years of programming with intention and practice. You can build new neural pathways that lead to abundance instead of lack, confidence instead of fear, action instead of paralysis. But here's what nobody tells you about reprogramming. It doesn't happen in a single breakthrough moment. It doesn't happen because you watched one motivational video or read one book or had one good day. It happens in the repetition. It happens in the boring, unglamorous moments when you choose differently even though every fiber of your being wants to default back to the old pattern. Let me give you a real example. Let's say you grew up in a house where money was always tight, where every unexpected expense was a crisis, where you heard, "We can't afford that," more times than you can count. That imprinted a specific belief. Money is scarce, money is stressful, having money means someone else doesn't. Now, you're an adult. You want to build wealth. You read the books, you set the goals, you make the vision board. But every time you're about to invest in yourself, every time you're about to raise your prices, every time you have an opportunity to expand, you feel that old tightness in your chest. That's not logic. That's your subconscious playing the old tape. Reprogramming means you notice that feeling and you do it anyway. Not once, not twice, but 50 times, 100 times, until the new response becomes automatic. You invest in the course, even though fear says no. You raise your rates, even though guilt whispers, "Who do you think you are?" You accept the compliment, even though unworthiness says they're just being nice. Each time you override the default, you're weakening the old pathway and strengthening the new one. Neuroscience calls this neuroplasticity. I call it becoming who you were meant to be before the world told you who you had to be. And here's the beautiful part. The subconscious doesn't judge. It doesn't care if the belief is true or false, helpful or harmful. It simply accepts what you feed it consistently. That means if you've programmed yourself for limitation, you can just as easily program yourself for expansion. Same mechanism, different input. Your subconscious doesn't care if you're right or wrong. It doesn't judge. It doesn't debate. It simply accepts. If you tell it, "I always struggle with money," it says, "Okay, let's create that reality for you." If you say, "Opportunities come to me effortlessly," it responds the same way, "Done. Let me show you how." This is where most people get stuck. They think changing their life means changing their circumstances first. Get the new job, then feel successful. Meet the right person, then feel loved. Make the money, then feel abundant. But that's backward. You have to feel it first. You have to impress the feeling onto your subconscious before the external world can reflect it back to you. Think of it like ordering from a catalog. You don't wait for the package to arrive before you place the order, right? You decide what you want. You submit the request, and then you go about your life knowing it's on its way. Your subconscious works the same way. You place the order through your thoughts and feelings. The universe fulfills it. But most people cancel their order every few hours by doubting, worrying, and contradicting what they asked for. "I want abundance." Then 5 minutes later, "But I can't afford this. Money is so tight. Why does this always happen to me?" You just canceled your order. Here's what Murphy taught. Persistence in assumption. You have to persist in the feeling of the wish fulfilled, not for 5 minutes, not until something goes wrong, but as a sustained state of consciousness. That doesn't mean ignoring reality. It means choosing which reality you're going to feed. Every time a contradictory thought comes up, and it will, you gently redirect. You don't fight it. You don't shame yourself for doubting. You simply return to the feeling. Return to the assumption. Return to the state of already having what you desire. This is the training. This is the work. Not striving, not forcing, just returning. Over and over. Until the new state becomes more natural than the old one. And here's the beautiful part. Your subconscious doesn't know the difference between a real experience and a vividly imagined one. When you imagine something with enough sensory detail and feeling, your subconscious accepts it as fact. This is why Olympic athletes mentally rehearse their performances. This is why musicians visualize flawless concerts before stepping on stage. They're not just daydreaming, they're programming their subconscious mind to accept a new reality. You can do the same with any condition in your life. If you want to heal a relationship, don't keep replaying the arguments. Instead, imagine a conversation where understanding flows naturally. Feel the warmth, hear the kindness in both voices. Make it real in your mind first. If you want financial abundance, stop identifying with lack. Create a mental scene that implies wealth. Maybe you're writing a generous check to a charity. Maybe you're holding a bank statement that makes you smile. It doesn't have to be elaborate, it just has to feel real to you. The key is this: when you imagine, you must feel it. Not strain, not force, but gently assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Dr. Murphy taught that feeling is the secret. You can visualize all day long, but if there's no feeling attached, you're just creating pictures. When you add feeling, you breathe life into those images. And here's where most people stumble. They try this for a day or two, see no immediate results, and quit. They say, "This doesn't work." But they wouldn't expect to plant a seed and have a tree the next morning. Growth happens beneath the surface first. Your subconscious is always working, always creating, but it works according to natural law, not according to your impatience. You must persist. Not with gritted teeth and desperation, but with quiet confidence. You plant the seed, water it with feeling, and trust the process. Every time doubt creeps in, every time you're tempted to return to the old mental patterns, you gently redirect your mind back to the new assumption. Because here's what most people don't understand about persistence in assumption. They think it means forcing themselves to believe something they don't believe. They think it's about repeating affirmations until their voice goes hoarse. But that's not it at all. True persistence is gentle. It's like teaching a child to walk. You don't scream at the child for falling. You don't punish them for stumbling. You simply guide them back to their feet, over and over, with patience and love. That's exactly how you must treat your own mind. When you catch yourself thinking from the old state, from lack, from limitation, from fear, you don't berate yourself, you don't spiral into self-judgment, you simply notice it, you acknowledge it without emotion, and then you gently, almost tenderly, redirect your attention back to your desired state. This is the art of mental discipline that nobody talks about. It's not harsh, it's not violent, it's actually one of the most compassionate things you can do for yourself. You're training your mind the way you'd train a beloved pet, with consistency and kindness, not cruelty. And here's where it gets interesting. The more you practice this gentle redirection, the shorter the time becomes between falling into the old state and catching yourself. At first, you might spend hours or even days in the old assumption before you remember to shift. Then it becomes hours, then minutes, then seconds. Eventually, something remarkable happens. Your new assumption becomes more familiar than your old one. It becomes your default setting. You don't have to work at it anymore. It becomes as natural as breathing. This is when people around you start to notice something's different about you, even before your external circumstances change. Because assumption changes you first. It changes your energy, your posture, your tone of voice, the light in your eyes. You begin to move through the world differently. And the world, which is nothing but a mirror of your inner state, has no choice but to reflect this change back to you. This is why people who discover this principle often report what seem like miraculous changes in their circumstances. They didn't change their external world directly. They changed their internal conversation, and the external world rearranged itself accordingly. I've seen this happen countless times. A woman who couldn't find work for months starts affirming, "I am valuable, capable, and in demand." Within weeks, 3 job offers appear. A man drowning in debt begins declaring, "I am financially abundant and guided toward prosperity." Unexpected opportunities materialize. Money arrives from forgotten sources. This isn't magic, it's mental law. You changed the broadcast, so you changed what you attracted. Now, here's where most people stumble. They try this principle for a few days, see no immediate results, and conclude it doesn't work. They go right back to their old patterns of negative self-talk, completely unaware that they just abandoned the process right before the breakthrough. Think of it like planting a seed. You don't dig it up every day to check if it's growing. You plant it, water it, trust the process, and allow nature to do its work beneath the surface. Your subconscious operates the same way. You plant the seed of a new belief through repetition and feeling. You water it with consistent affirmation. Then you trust. You don't check the mirror every hour to see if you look different. You don't obsess over when the change will come. You simply know it's working beneath the surface, in the invisible realm where all creation begins. The truth is, your subconscious is working on your behalf this very moment. It never sleeps. It never stops. While you're reading this, it's orchestrating thousands of biological processes, regulating your heartbeat, digesting your food, healing cuts you forgot you had. It's also working to manifest whatever you've impressed upon it. The question isn't whether it's working. The question is, what have you programmed it to work on? Fear or faith? Lack or abundance? Sickness or health? The choice is yours and only yours. Now let me share something with you that changed everything for me when I finally understood it. Your subconscious doesn't just accept what you tell it once. It accepts what you tell it times repeatedly asterisk, with times feeling asterisk, until it becomes your new normal. That's why affirmations work, not because they're magic words, but because they reprogram the beliefs buried deep in your mind. Let me give you a real example. There was a woman who came to one of Murphy's lectures years ago. She was drowning in debt. Every month, more bills than income. Every day, more anxiety than peace. She tried budgeting. She tried working overtime. She tried everything on the outside. But nothing changed. Why? Because inside, she still saw herself as poor. She still believed, deep down, that money was scarce, that she wasn't worthy of wealth, that financial struggle was just her lot in life. Murphy told her to do something simple but powerful. Every night before sleep, and every morning upon waking, she was to repeat with feeling, I am wealthy in mind and spirit. Money flows to me easily and naturally. I am a magnet for abundance. Not just say it, asterisk, feel times it. She had to close her eyes and imagine what wealth felt like. The relief, the freedom, the gratitude. At first, it felt like lying. Her logical mind screamed, this is ridiculous, you're broke. But she persisted, every single day, with emotion, with conviction. And here's what happened. Within 2 weeks, she got a phone call from an old client who owed her money she'd written off years ago. They paid her in full. A month later, she was offered a new position at work she hadn't even applied for, with a significant raise. 3 months later, her entire financial situation had transformed. Was it magic? No. Was it the law? Yes. Her subconscious mind, fed daily with images and feelings of abundance, began to guide her actions, her decisions, her energy toward wealth. She started noticing opportunities she'd walked past before. She started speaking with more confidence. She started making choices from abundance instead of fear. Her outer world reflected her inner shift. This is how it works for everyone, no exceptions. The subconscious is utterly impartial. It will create poverty or prosperity based solely on the mental images you feed it consistently. Your subconscious mind doesn't judge your thoughts. It doesn't say, oh, this person deserves wealth, or that person should struggle. It simply accepts the dominant mental patterns you give it and translates them into corresponding conditions in your life. I've watched this principle play out in thousands of lives. 2 people can work in the same office, have the same education, the same opportunities. One rises steadily while the other remains stuck. The difference? The mental diet. The inner conversations. The images held in the theater of the mind. The person who rises constantly sees themselves advancing. They imagine the promotion before it comes. They feel the satisfaction of increased responsibility. They rehearse success in their mind until it feels natural, inevitable. Their subconscious receives these instructions and begins orchestrating circumstances to match. The person who stays stuck? They're equally consistent, but in the opposite direction. They rehearse complaints. They imagine being overlooked. They tell themselves stories about why others get ahead while they don't. And their faithful subconscious servant delivers exactly what's been ordered. This is why I say your habitual thinking is everything. Not your occasional positive thought when you remember to be optimistic. Your habitual thinking. The thoughts you think when you're not consciously monitoring yourself. The assumptions running in the background like software code. Most people have no idea what they're habitually assuming about themselves. They've never examined the unconscious beliefs that govern their expectations. They wonder why life feels hard while never questioning the inner narrative that says it must be hard. Let me give you a simple test right now. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine receiving unexpected good news about money. Perhaps a check arrives in the mail, a bonus, an inheritance, a lucrative opportunity falls into your lap. Now notice what's your immediate emotional response. Is it acceptance, a feeling of yes, of course, or is it disbelief? Do you immediately wonder what the catch is? Does your mind jump to reasons why this couldn't really happen to you? That response tells you everything about your current subconscious conditioning around money. If unexpected good fortune feels natural and believable, your subconscious is programmed for prosperity. If it feels suspicious or too good to be true, you've identified the exact belief that's blocking your financial flow. Now, here's what most people do when they discover this resistance. They try to fight it. They argue with themselves. No, I do deserve money. I'm not suspicious. I believe in abundance. And they wonder why nothing changes. Fighting your subconscious beliefs is like trying to win an argument with the ocean. You're not going to convince the tide to stop coming in through logical debate. Instead, you need to work with the subconscious the way it actually operates. And the subconscious speaks one primary language, the language of feeling and repetition. This is why affirmations fail for most people. They're standing in front of a mirror saying, I am wealthy, I am wealthy, I am wealthy, while their stomach is in knots, their chest is tight, and every cell in their body is screaming, this is a lie. The words go in one ear and out the other because the feeling state contradicts them completely. Your subconscious doesn't care what you say, it only accepts what you feel to be true. Joseph Murphy understood this deeply. He taught that you must feel the reality of your desire before it manifests in the physical world. Not pretend to feel it, not fake enthusiasm, but genuinely cultivate the emotional state that would be natural if your desire were already fulfilled. This is the secret that separates those who successfully reprogram their financial reality from those who spend years doing affirmations with zero results. Let me give you a practical example. Imagine you're trying to impress the feeling of financial abundance into your subconscious. Most people approach this by imagining huge bank accounts, mansions, luxury cars, and they feel nothing. Or worse, they feel anxious because it seems so far removed from their current reality. But what if instead, you started with a feeling you can actually access? What does financial peace feel like? Not excitement, not luxury, just peace. The absence of that knot in your stomach when bills arrive, the quiet confidence that you're taken care of. That feeling is accessible right now. You can generate it through memory, through imagination, through deliberately relaxing the tension you associate with money. And once you generate that feeling, something remarkable begins to happen. Your decisions shift. The actions you take come from a different place. Instead of scrambling to avoid poverty, you're building toward abundance. And your subconscious mind recognizes the difference. Think about someone you know who seems to have a natural ease with money. Not someone who's stressed and obsessed, but someone who just flows with it. Watch how they make decisions. They don't panic. They don't hoard. They don't spend recklessly trying to prove something. There's a calm assurance in how they handle their finances. That's not because they have some special gift you lack. It's because somewhere along the way, they developed an inner conviction about prosperity. Maybe they had parents who modeled financial peace. Maybe they succeeded once and internalized that success. Maybe they consciously trained their subconscious mind through the very principles we're discussing. The point is this: you can develop that same conviction, right now, today, not by waiting for circumstances to change, but by changing your inner world first. Your subconscious doesn't care whether your conviction came from external success or internal decision. It simply responds to the dominant feeling you carry. If you walk around feeling prosperous, if you think from abundance rather than toward it, your subconscious begins orchestrating circumstances to match that state. I'm not talking about pretending you're rich when you're not. I'm talking about accessing the feeling of security, of being provided for, of trusting in the infinite supply that flows through all of life. That feeling is legitimate. It's based on spiritual law, not bank account balances. When you pray for money or success, are you praying from a feeling of lack or from a feeling of acceptance? Are you begging the universe to rescue you? Or are you claiming what is already yours by divine right? The emotion behind your prayer matters infinitely more than the words you use. Murphy taught that effective prayer is not about convincing God to change his mind. It's about aligning your consciousness with the infinite abundance that already exists. It's about opening yourself to receive what is always being given. When you pray, you're not reaching up to a distant deity perched on some celestial throne. You're reaching times and times into the infinite intelligence that resides within your own consciousness. You're tuning your mental radio to a frequency that's already broadcasting abundance, health, and prosperity. This is why Murphy insisted that the quality of your prayer matters more than the quantity. You can repeat affirmations 1,000 times, but if your subconscious mind is saturated with doubt and fear, those words will bounce off like rain on pavement. However, if you can enter into a state of conviction even for just a few minutes, where you times feel times the reality of your answered prayer, you've done the work. Think of it like planting a seed. You don't dig it up every hour to check if it's growing. You don't stand over it, wringing your hands with worry. You plant it with confidence, water it consistently, and then you times trust times the process. The seed contains within itself all the intelligence necessary to become a mighty tree. Your desire, held in consciousness with faith, contains within itself all the power necessary to manifest in your physical world. This brings us to one of Murphy's most liberating teachings, the futility of manipulation and control. So many people exhaust themselves trying to orchestrate the times of their manifestation. They map out intricate plans, trying to force reality to bend to their limited perspective. They become anxious about timing, methods, and pathways. But Murphy taught that your job is not to figure out how times your good will come to you. Your job is simply to accept that it times will asterisk. The infinite intelligence of your subconscious mind has access to resources, connections, and possibilities that your conscious mind cannot even imagine. When you try to dictate the method, you're actually limiting the channels through which your good can flow. I've watched people pray for financial abundance while simultaneously rejecting opportunities because they didn't match their preconceived notions of how money should arrive. They wanted a lottery win, so they ignored the business idea. They wanted an inheritance, so they dismissed the job offer. Your subconscious doesn't care about your preferred delivery method. It responds to the clarity and feeling of your request, then orchestrates circumstances according to infinite intelligence. When you limit the channels through which your good can come, you're not trusting, you're controlling, and control is always rooted in fear. I learned this lesson powerfully when working with a woman who desperately wanted to find love. She had a very specific picture: tall, dark-haired, works in finance, drives a particular car, has a corner office. She prayed with what she thought was faith, but weeks turned into months with no results. When we examined her consciousness together, the problem became crystal clear. She wasn't praying for love, she was ordering from a catalog. She wasn't opening herself to the perfect partner. She was demanding the universe rearrange itself according to her limited specifications. I asked her a simple question: do you want to be happy, or do you want to be right about how happiness should look? That question changed everything. She began praying differently. Instead of dictating terms, she focused on the feeling of being loved, cherished, and understood. She imagined the emotional experience of partnership without specifying the packaging. 3 weeks later, she met someone who matched none of her original criteria but everything her heart actually needed. He was shorter, lighter-haired, worked as a teacher, and took the bus. And she'd never been happier. This is what surrendering the how really means. You define the what, the end result, the feeling, the essence of your desire. But you release completely any attachment to the route by which it arrives. Think of it this way: if you wanted to travel from New York to California, you'd be foolish to insist the pilot take only one specific route, regardless of weather patterns, air traffic, or mechanical considerations. You trust the pilot knows the best way to get you there safely. Your subconscious is infinitely wiser than any pilot. It sees connections you cannot see, orchestrates meetings you could never arrange, and opens doors you didn't know existed. Your logical mind is a fantastic tool for choosing your destination, but it was never meant to be the one flying the plane. When you plant a seed in the ground, you don't dig it up every morning to check if it's growing. You don't stand over it, wringing your hands, wondering if you placed it at the right depth or watered it correctly. You plant it, and then you trust the soil, the sun, the rain, and the intelligence within that seed to do what they've been doing for millions of years. Your desire is that seed. Your subconscious mind is the fertile soil, and worry is you digging up that seed every single day, preventing it from taking root. I've watched people sabotage their own prayers with this exact pattern. They pray for healing, and then immediately start telling everyone how sick they are. They affirm abundance, and then spend their lunch break complaining about bills. They visualize their ideal relationship, and then scroll through social media feeling envious and alone. This isn't faith, this is spiritual self-sabotage. Every time you return to the worry, every time you rehash the problem, every time you tell the story of lack or limitation, you are planting a new seed of exactly what you don't want, and the subconscious doesn't judge. It doesn't say, "Oh, she didn't really mean that." It simply accepts the impression and begins to manifest it. This is why persistence in the right mental state matters more than effort in the physical world. A person who spends 5 minutes in absolute conviction that their good is on its way will accomplish more than someone who spends 50 hours frantically strategizing from a place of fear. Your subconscious doesn't measure your worthiness. It doesn't weigh your past failures or compare you to anyone else. It simply receives the image you give it and works tirelessly to bring it into form. This is why affirmations work, not because words have magic power, but because they imprint your subconscious with a new pattern when repeated with feeling. Let me share something practical with you. There was a man who came to one of my lectures years ago, completely defeated. He'd been unemployed for nearly 2 years. He told me he'd sent out hundreds of resumes, attended dozens of interviews, done everything right according to conventional wisdom, but nothing worked. When I asked him what he was thinking about all day, he admitted he constantly imagined being rejected, pictured himself running out of money, and felt a knot of anxiety in his stomach every morning. I told him something simple: stop working so hard on the outside and start working on the inside. I gave him one instruction: every night before sleep, spend 10 minutes imagining the feeling of being gainfully employed, not the job itself, the feeling, the relief, the dignity, the satisfaction of contributing, the ease of paying bills without worry. He thought it was too simple, but he did it anyway. Within 3 weeks, a former colleague reached out about an opportunity he hadn't even applied for. Within 5 weeks, he had a position that paid more than his previous job. What changed? Not his resume, not the job market. His consciousness changed, and his outer world reorganized itself to match. This is the mechanics of manifestation. Consciousness is cause. Everything else is effect. When you change the inner, the outer must follow. It's not optional, it's law. Just as water must freeze at 32 degrees Fahrenheit, your outer world must conform to the temperature of your inner convictions. But here's where most people stumble. They try this for a day or two, see no immediate result, and give up. They return to their old patterns of worry and complaint. They're like a gardener who plants a seed, then digs it up the next day to see if it's growing. The law requires persistence, not desperate, anxious persistence, but calm, confident, knowing persistence. The person who succeeds with this law is the one who understands the nature of mental gardening. You plant your seed, your desire firmly impressed upon your subconscious mind, then you water it daily with feelings of gratitude and expectation. You don't dig it up to check on it. You don't stand over it with anxiety wondering if it's working. You trust the process. Your subconscious mind is like the soil. It doesn't argue with the seed. It doesn't say, "I'll grow this tomato seed, but not that one because I don't like it." The soil accepts whatever seed is planted and begins working on it immediately. Your subconscious mind works the same way. It accepts the impressions you give it and begins working to manifest them in your external world. But here's where most people sabotage themselves. They plant seeds of prosperity in the morning through affirmations and visualization, then spend the rest of the day planting seeds of lack through worry and negative conversation. They wonder why nothing grows. You cannot plant wheat in the morning and thorns in the afternoon and expect a harvest of wheat. The law requires consistency of mental impression. This doesn't mean you must think about your desire every single moment. That would be exhausting and counterproductive. What it means is that whenever you do think about your desire, you must think about it correctly as already accomplished, with the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Let me give you a practical example. Suppose you desire financial abundance. The wrong way to work with this law is to constantly think, I need money, where will the money come from? This impresses your subconscious with the idea of lack and need. The right way is to feel, even just for a few minutes each day, what it would be like to have abundant resources. Feel the security, the freedom, the peace of mind that comes with financial abundance. You don't need to know how it will come. That's not your job. Your job is to establish the feeling. The subconscious mind, which is connected to infinite intelligence, will find the means. It will open doors you didn't know existed. It will bring opportunities, ideas, and people into your path that align with the mental state you've established. This is how the law works. You don't need to know the how. You only need to hold the what and the why. The universe responds to your mental acceptance. Your faith sets the creative forces in motion, and the path reveals itself step by step. Let me share something that might surprise you. Many people fail not because they don't visualize or affirm, but because they keep checking the results too soon. They plant a seed in the morning and dig it up by afternoon to see if it's growing. This constant checking is a form of doubt. It tells the subconscious, I don't really believe this is working. When you plant a seed in the ground, you don't stand over it anxiously every hour. You trust the process. You water it, give it sunlight, and allow nature to do its work. The same principle applies to mental seeds. Once you've impressed your desire upon the subconscious with feeling and conviction, let it go. Trust that it's working beneath the surface, even when you can't see immediate evidence. The waiting period is not passive. It's a time of inner cultivation. During this time, continue to live from the end. Act as though your desire is already fulfilled. Make decisions from that consciousness. Speak from that reality. Feel the emotions that would accompany the fulfillment of your desire. If you're praying for prosperity but constantly complaining about lack, you're contradicting your prayer. If you're affirming health but speaking about illness all day, you're canceling your own good. Your habitual thoughts and words must align with your desired end. Here's a practice that transforms this waiting period into active creation. Throughout your day, whenever you catch yourself in doubt or negative thinking, immediately flip it. Don't fight the negative thought that gives it power. Simply replace it with its opposite. If fear arises, acknowledge it and then affirm, I am divinely guided and protected. If worry about money comes up, gently redirect to, my needs are always met abundantly. This isn't positive thinking as a band-aid. This is retraining your mental habits. You're building new neural pathways. You're establishing a new default consciousness. Over time, faith becomes your natural state, not something you have to force. When resistance appears, and it will, don't fight it. Simply observe it with compassionate curiosity. Oh, there's that old pattern again. There's that familiar doubt trying to protect me from disappointment. You don't have to wrestle with these thoughts. You don't have to convince them they're wrong. Just acknowledge them and gently redirect your attention back to faith. It's like training a puppy. You don't punish it for wandering off. You simply guide it back, again and again, with patience and kindness. Here's something powerful. Resistance often appears strongest right before your breakthrough. It's like the darkest hour before dawn. Your subconscious mind is being asked to change its entire operating system, and change, even positive change, can feel threatening to the part of you that values safety and predictability. So when you feel the most doubt, when the old patterns seem loudest, recognize this as a sign you're actually making progress. You're at the edge of transformation. The old consciousness is making its final stand before surrendering to your new faith-based reality. I've watched this pattern countless times. Someone practices faith consistently for days or weeks, and then suddenly they hit a wall. Everything feels harder. Doubt floods in. They think they're regressing, but actually, they're right on the verge of a quantum leap. The subconscious is reorganizing itself at a fundamental level, and that reorganization can feel chaotic before it settles into a new, higher order. This is when your commitment matters most. This is when you prove to yourself that your faith isn't just a fair-weather friend, but a deep conviction that sustains you through uncertainty. And here's the beautiful paradox. When you maintain your faith through these challenging moments, when you choose trust despite the appearance of difficulty, you accelerate your transformation exponentially. Each time you choose faith over fear in a moment of real challenge, you're not just maintaining your practice, you're deepening it at the most profound level. You're teaching your subconscious that faith is non-negotiable, that it's not dependent on favorable circumstances, that it's the foundation upon which everything else is built. Let me share something that happened to a woman who contacted me after years of struggling with this very issue. She'd been trying to manifest her ideal partner for over 3 years. She'd done the visualizations. She'd written the lists. She'd cleared her chakras, released her blocks, and done every ritual under the sun. But nothing was changing in her outer world. When I asked her about her mental diet, the truth came tumbling out. Well, she said, I do my morning visualization. But then, throughout the day, when I see happy couples, I feel this pang of loneliness. When my friends talk about their relationships, I feel left out. When I go to weddings, I wonder if it'll ever be my turn. And at night, before I sleep, I sometimes cry because another day has passed and I'm still alone. Do you see what was happening? 20 minutes of focused visualization and 16 waking hours of emotional contradiction. Her subconscious wasn't getting mixed signals. It was getting one very clear signal. Loneliness, lack, and longing are your reality. I gave her one instruction. Just one. Stop trying to manifest. Stop visualizing. Stop doing techniques. Instead, spend the next 30 days becoming someone who already has what they want. Not someone who's trying to get it. Someone who already has it. How do I do that? She asked. Simple, I told her. Someone who's in a loving relationship doesn't scan every room for potential partners. They don't obsess over their phone waiting for messages. They don't feel panicked about their biological clock. They feel peaceful, complete. They might notice attractive people, but there's no desperate energy behind it. They're already fulfilled. That's why the detachment paradox works. You can't truly let go while you're still clinging with one hand behind your back. You can't authentically stop caring while secretly keeping score, checking your phone every 10 minutes, analyzing every word they said, looking for hidden meanings in their silence. Real detachment means you're genuinely okay if it never happens. Not pretending to be okay, not performing nonchalance. Actually, deeply okay. And here's what's wild. When you reach that state, when you're truly complete without them, your entire energy shifts. You stop broadcasting need. You start radiating wholeness. And wholeness is magnetic in a way desperation never can be. Think about the last time someone wanted something from you with desperate energy, a salesperson who reeked of commission anxiety, a friend who needed validation, someone seeking approval. How did it feel? You probably wanted to create distance, right? That's what desperation does. It repels. Now think about someone who shared something with you but clearly didn't need your approval. Someone offering value without attachment to your response. Someone complete in themselves. That energy draws you in. You want to be around it. Your specific person responds to the same energy dynamics. When you need them, they feel the weight of your expectation. When you're complete without them, they feel the freedom to choose you because they want to, not because you need them to. This is why so many people report their person returning exactly when they stopped caring. Not because the universe is cruel or testing you, but because that's when your vibration finally aligned with receiving. That's when you stopped blocking what you claimed you wanted. The block was never them. The block was always your desperate energy pushing against the natural flow. Your attachment creating resistance. Your need generating the opposite of magnetic attraction. So the work isn't to manipulate them. The work is to become so complete in yourself that their presence is a preference, not a necessity. A wonderful addition, not a missing piece. And when you shift from that place, when you stop needing them to complete you, something miraculous happens. They feel it. Not because you tell them, not because you explain it or justify it or announce some grand declaration of change. They feel it in the way you carry yourself. In the way you no longer flinch when they pull away. In the way your happiness isn't conditional on their mood or their attention. And here's what most people don't realize. That shift, that internal solidness is more attractive than any game, any strategy, any perfectly timed text could ever be. Because people are drawn to wholeness. They're drawn to those who don't need them to be something they're not. They're drawn to the energy of someone who's already full, already grounded, already at peace. But let me be clear about something. This doesn't mean you become cold. It doesn't mean you stop caring or stop showing love or stop being vulnerable. It means you stop making their response the condition for your inner state. You can love them deeply and still be okay if they leave. You can want them fiercely and still feel whole without them. You can open your heart completely and still know that your worth isn't determined by whether they choose to stay. That's the paradox most people can't hold. They think loving fully means depending fully. They think vulnerability requires the other person to reciprocate in order to feel safe. But real love, the kind that actually lasts, comes from overflow, not from lack. It comes from a cup that's already full, pouring into another, not from an empty vessel desperately trying to fill itself through someone else. And this is where the real transformation begins. Because when you're no longer approaching the relationship from desperation, when you're no longer silently begging for proof of their love, When you're no longer scanning every word and gesture for signs of rejection, you finally see the relationship clearly. You see whether it's actually good for you, whether it's built on mutual respect and genuine connection, or whether you've been clinging to potential, to glimpses, to the idea of what it could be, if only they would change. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes what you realize is that the person you've been chasing, the person you've been trying so hard to keep, isn't actually the right person for the life you're building. And that's not failure. That's not giving up. That's spiritual maturity. That's you honoring the truth that's been quietly sitting in your chest, waiting for you to be brave enough to acknowledge it. Because here's what nobody tells you about letting go. Sometimes the hardest person to release isn't the one who hurt you the most. It's the one who was almost right. The one who gave you just enough hope to keep holding on. The one who, in another version of your life, in another timeline, might have been everything you needed, but not in this one. Not as they are, not as you're becoming. And your subconscious mind, when you stop fighting it, when you stop overriding its wisdom with fearful thoughts and desperate justifications, it knows the difference. It feels the difference between a connection that nourishes you and a connection that depletes you. Between a love that expands your life and a love that shrinks it. Between someone who meets you where you are and someone who keeps you waiting in the hallway of what might be. You can love someone deeply and still choose yourself. You can honor what you shared and still walk away. You can acknowledge the beauty of what was without sacrificing the peace of what could be. This isn't cruelty. This is consciousness. This is you refusing to abandon yourself for the comfort of not being alone. Now, I want to address something directly, because I know some of you are thinking, but what if I give up too soon? What if I walk away from something that could have worked if I'd just tried harder, held on longer, believed more? And I understand that fear. I really do. But let me ask you this. How long is long enough? How many times do you need to have the same conversation? How many promises need to go unkept? How many versions of yourself do you need to diminish before you accept that effort without reciprocity isn't love, it's self-abandonment? And yet, you've been conditioned to believe that walking away makes you the villain. You've internalized the narrative that setting boundaries is selfish, that protecting your peace is cruel, that choosing yourself is abandonment. But let me ask you this. Who taught you that lesson? Was it the people who benefited from your boundarylessness? Was it the relationships that survived only because you were willing to shrink? You see, the people who resist your boundaries the most are the ones who benefited most from you having none. They will call you cold when you stop being warm on demand. They will accuse you of changing when you stop changing for them. They will paint your self-respect as arrogance and your clarity as cruelty. And if you're not careful, if you haven't done the inner work, you'll believe them. You'll second-guess yourself. You'll soften your stance. You'll negotiate your non-negotiables. But here's what you need to understand. Their discomfort with your growth is not your responsibility to manage. Their inability to meet you at your new level is not a reason for you to lower yourself back down. You are not required to remain in the version of yourself that made them comfortable. You are not obligated to stay small so others feel big. This is where the real work begins. Not in the initial decision to walk away, but in the daily recommitment to that decision when guilt comes knocking, when nostalgia rewrites history, when loneliness whispers that anything is better than nothing. This is when you must stand firm in the knowing that you are not rejecting love by refusing dysfunction. You are not giving up on connection by releasing incompatibility. You are not closing your heart by refusing to let it be a doormat. You are honoring the sacred temple of your being by refusing to allow chaos to dwell within it. Because, here's what so many people misunderstand about spiritual maturity and self-love. They think it means being endlessly patient, infinitely forgiving, constantly available to everyone who knocks on their door. They believe that setting a boundary is evidence of a hardened heart, that walking away is proof of spiritual failure. But the truth is this: the greatest act of self-respect is knowing when to close a door that should never have been opened in the first place. I've watched people spend years, sometimes decades, trying to love someone into wholeness, trying to prove their worth to someone who cannot see it, trying to build a foundation on sand because they're terrified of being alone. And what happens? They become strangers to themselves. They lose touch with their own voice. They forget what peace feels like in their own body. This is not love. This is self-abandonment dressed up in the costume of devotion. And your subconscious mind, which is always working to protect you, to guide you toward your highest good, will begin to rebel. It will speak through anxiety, through sleepless nights, through that persistent whisper that something is fundamentally wrong. It will drain your energy, dim your light, close your throat when you try to speak your truth. Because deep down, beneath all the rationalizations and hopeful thinking, your inner wisdom knows this connection is not aligned with who you are becoming. So when you finally make the decision to walk away, when you finally choose yourself over the familiar pain, when you finally say no more to what has been draining your life force, understand this. You are not being selfish. You are being obedient to the divine guidance within you. You are saying yes to your future by saying no to what no longer serves your present. You are creating space for something real by releasing what was always an illusion. And yes, it will be uncomfortable. Yes, there will be moments of doubt. Yes, you will wonder if you made a mistake, if you gave up too soon, if you should have tried harder. But stay anchored in this truth. A person who was meant for you would not require you to betray yourself to keep them. You don't need to shrink to make someone comfortable. You don't need to silence your voice to avoid conflict. You don't need to lower your standards to keep someone from walking away. The right person will meet you where you are and walk beside you, not require you to crawl behind them. And here's what starts to happen when you truly embody this understanding. You stop seeing closure as something you're owed. You realize that waiting for an apology, an explanation, or a final conversation is just another way of keeping yourself tied to someone who's already gone. Closure isn't something someone gives you. It's a decision you make within yourself. You close the door. You stop checking if they've watched your story. You stop crafting messages in your head that you'll never send. You stop replaying conversations, searching for the moment it all went wrong. You accept that some chapters end mid-sentence, and that's okay. The story doesn't need a perfect ending to be over. I've watched people waste years waiting for closure that never came. They put their entire life on hold because they needed to understand why. But the truth is, sometimes there is no satisfying answer. Sometimes people leave because they're not ready, because they're afraid, because they're broken in ways you can't fix. And none of that has anything to do with your worth. You are not defined by who stayed or who left. You are defined by how you choose to see yourself when no one is watching. You are defined by the promises you keep to yourself, the boundaries you maintain, the love you refuse to compromise. And as you move forward, something beautiful begins to unfold. You start attracting different energy. People who are whole show up differently than people who are broken. They communicate clearly. They show up consistently. They don't play games because they're not at war with themselves. They add to your peace rather than disturb it. But you have to become that person first. You have to do the inner work. You have to heal the parts of you that believed you weren't enough. You have to forgive yourself for the times you accepted less than you deserved. You have to release the bitterness, the resentment, the anger, and choose something higher. This isn't about denying what happened to you. It's about refusing to let what happened to you define what happens next. It's about taking your power back from the past and investing it in your future. When you do this work, when you genuinely heal those wounded parts of yourself, something miraculous happens. You stop attracting the same lessons in different packaging. You stop repeating the same painful patterns with different people. The universe stops sending you the same test over and over because you finally passed it. And here's what nobody tells you about healing. It doesn't just change your future, it reframes your past. When you heal, you look back at those painful experiences and you see them differently. You see the strength you gained. You see the wisdom you earned. You see how every breakdown was actually a breakthrough waiting to happen. That person who broke your heart, they taught you what you won't tolerate anymore. That job that crushed your spirit, it showed you what you're actually meant to do. That friendship that betrayed you, it revealed who your real people are. Nothing was wasted, nothing was meaningless. Every single experience was preparation for who you're becoming. But you have to be willing to extract the lesson without carrying the pain. You have to be willing to gain the wisdom without wearing the wound as an identity badge. You have to graduate from the experience instead of making it your permanent residence. So many people say they want to move forward, but they're still living in the story of what hurt them. They're still rehearsing the betrayal. They're still replaying the rejection. They're still reliving the loss. And every time you do that, every time you mentally return to that painful place, you're re-traumatizing yourself. You're keeping the wound fresh. You're telling your subconscious mind that this is still happening, that you're still that person, that you're still in that situation. Your mind doesn't know the difference between a memory and reality when you engage with it emotionally. When you replay that argument with full emotional intensity, your body responds as if it's happening right now. Your nervous system activates. Your stress hormones release. Your energy drops. You're literally making yourself sick with memories. Your body doesn't care that the danger is over. It responds to the mental replay as if it's happening right now, in this very moment. This is what most people call dwelling on the past. But it's more than that. You're not just remembering, you're recreating. You're giving old events fresh energy, new life, continued power over your present state. And here's what makes this particularly destructive. Every time you replay a negative memory, you're actually changing it. Your subconscious mind doesn't store memories like a video recording. It reconstructs them each time, adding present emotions, current interpretations, today's fears. That argument from 5 years ago, you're not remembering what actually happened. You're remembering your last memory of it, which was already distorted from the memory before that. Each replay adds another layer of negativity, another coating of emotional charge. You're not healing by revisiting, you're infecting by re-exposing. This is why some people carry wounds from childhood that feel as fresh at 50 as they did at 5. They've kept the wound open through constant mental contact. They've rehearsed the hurt so many times that it's become more vivid than the original event ever was. The subconscious mind has no defense against this self-inflicted repetition. It accepts what you persistently feed it. If you feed it images of past pain, it assumes that pain is your desired state and works to maintain it. I want you to understand something crucial. The past has no power, except the power you give it through present thought. That person who hurt you 10 years ago? They're living their life, probably not thinking about you at all. But you're still punishing yourself with the memory, still reacting emotionally to something that exists nowhere except in your own mind. You've become your own torturer, using memories as the instrument. And here's the most unsettling part: you've probably been doing this so long that it feels normal. The mental loops, the emotional reactions to memories, the way certain thoughts trigger entire cascades of feelings, it's all become so familiar that you don't even question it anymore. You think that's just how life is. You think that's just who you are. But it's not. It's a habit. A deeply ingrained, unconsciously reinforced habit of allowing your mental images to control your emotional state. And like any habit, it can be changed once you become aware of it. Think about how much energy you spend maintaining these mental prisons. Every time you replay that embarrassing moment, every time you rehearse that argument you wish you'd handled differently, every time you visualize that fear coming true, you're pouring creative energy into images that work against your well-being. You're essentially feeding and strengthening the very things you don't want in your life. Your subconscious doesn't judge these images. It doesn't say, "Oh, this is just a memory, I'll ignore it," or "This is just a worry." It's not real. Your subconscious accepts every vivid mental image you present to it and begins to express it in your experience. That's its function. That's what it does with every thought, every image, every mental picture you dwell upon with feeling. So when you constantly replay scenes of rejection, failure, or humiliation, you're instructing your subconscious to create more experiences that match those images. When you mentally rehearse conversations where you're overlooked or disrespected, you're programming yourself to expect and attract exactly that. You're literally designing your future disappointments in the workshop of your mind. Most people do this unconsciously. They don't realize they're architects of their own suffering. They think life just happens to them, that circumstances are beyond their control, that other people determine their emotional state. They've completely abdicated their power to the random movements of memory and imagination. But you're not most people. You're here because some part of you knows there's another way. Some part of you recognizes that if mental images have this much power, you can harness that power deliberately. You can become the director of your own inner theater instead of its captive audience. This is where the real work begins. Not positive thinking, not denial, not pretending everything's fine when it's not, but the disciplined reconstruction of the inner world that generates your outer experience. Let me give you the framework that changed everything for me. I call it the evening review and revision process. It's simple, but don't let that simplicity fool you. This practice has more power than 1,000 affirmations shouted at the mirror. Here's how it works. Tonight, before you fall asleep, you're going to mentally review your day. but not passively. Not like watching a boring documentary. You're going to actively engage with the memories that still carry emotional charge. Think about that conversation that went wrong. That moment you felt small, rejected, or powerless. That situation where you reacted instead of responded. Don't judge yourself for it. Just acknowledge it happened. Now comes the crucial part. In your imagination, you're going to rewrite that scene. You're going to replay it exactly as you wish it had happened. See yourself responding with confidence, clarity, and calm. Hear the words you wish you had said. Feel the emotions you wish you had felt. If someone criticized you and you walked away feeling diminished, replay it with you receiving their words without defensiveness, responding with dignity, and walking away feeling centered and strong. If you had an awkward encounter that left you ruminating, revise it. See it unfolding smoothly, naturally, with both parties feeling heard and respected. This isn't about lying to yourself. This is about refusing to let your subconscious mind rehearse failure over and over. Because here's what most people don't understand. Every time you replay a negative memory, you're not just remembering it, you're recreating it. You're etching it deeper into your neural pathways. You're telling your subconscious, this is who I am, this is what I do. And what happens when you do this consistently? Your subconscious begins to operate on autopilot in alignment with your vision. It starts filtering your reality through the lens of success. You begin noticing opportunities you would have missed before. You start taking actions that feel natural, effortless, because they're coming from a place of identity, not willpower. This is the difference between someone who tries to be successful and someone who simply is. The person who tries is always at war with themselves. They wake up and have to convince themselves to take action. They have to fight resistance every single day. But the person who has claimed their identity, they don't have to fight, they just are. This is what I mean when I say you must stop rehearsing your limitations. Every time you say, I can't, I'm not, it's too hard, I always fail, you're not just expressing a temporary feeling, you're giving your subconscious a command, you're programming your identity. And here's what's tragic, most people are more committed to their story of limitation than they are to their dreams. They've told the story of why they can't succeed so many times that it's become gospel truth in their mind. They wear their limitations like a badge of honor. I'm just not good with money. I'm naturally anxious. Success isn't in my DNA. These aren't truths. They're habits of thought that have calcified into identity, and they can be dissolved the same way they were formed through repetition of a new pattern. So I'm asking you right now, what story have you been rehearsing? What version of yourself have you been practicing in the quiet moments when no one's watching? Because that's the version that's going to show up in your life. If you've been rehearsing lack, you'll experience lack. If you've been rehearsing doubt, you'll live in doubt. But if you start rehearsing abundance, confidence, success, health, joy, if you start living from that place before the evidence appears, your subconscious will move heaven and earth to make it your reality. Your life is a stage, and you are both the actor and the director. What role are you choosing to play? You might say, but what if I've been rehearsing the wrong role for years? What if I've become so good at playing the victim, the struggler, the unlucky one, that it feels like my identity? Here's the truth. No role is permanent. No script is unchangeable. Every single day, you get a fresh audition. Every morning you wake up, you have the power to try out for a different part. I've seen people who spent decades rehearsing poverty suddenly shift their internal script and watch their financial reality transform within months. I've witnessed individuals who rehearsed loneliness and rejection for so long that they believed it was their destiny until they began rehearsing love, worthiness, and connection, and found themselves surrounded by meaningful relationships. The subconscious mind doesn't care how long you've been playing a certain role. It only responds to what you're rehearsing right now, in this present moment. Think about this. Every time you replay a worry, you're rehearsing that outcome. Every time you imagine a conversation going badly, you're doing a dress rehearsal for failure. Every time you visualize yourself sick, broke, or rejected, you're perfecting that performance. But the magnificent truth is this: you can rehearse anything you want. You can close your eyes right now and rehearse success. You can feel what it feels like to walk into that room with confidence. You can practice the emotion of receiving good news. You can imagine yourself healthy, vibrant, and full of energy. And here's what most people miss. The rehearsal is not preparation for life. The rehearsal is life. The feelings you generate during your mental rehearsal are real. The neural pathways you create are real. The subconscious programming you install is real. Your future self is being shaped by the role you're rehearsing today. So ask yourself, who am I becoming through my daily mental rehearsals? What reality am I practicing into existence? The curtain rises every morning. The question is, what performance will you give today? Because here's what I've learned through decades of studying the subconscious mind. The universe doesn't care about your reasons. It doesn't distinguish between I'm just being realistic and genuine belief. When you speak lack, you get lack. When you speak limitation, you get limitation. When you speak possibility, miracles unfold. I once counseled a man who came to me utterly defeated. He'd been unemployed for 18 months. Every interview ended the same way, rejection. And he would tell me, "Dr. Murphy, I just can't seem to catch a break. No one wants to hire someone my age." I stopped him right there. Listen to what you just said. You've condemned yourself with your own words. You've written the script, cast yourself as the victim, and rehearsed that failure story until your subconscious accepted it as law. We began the work immediately. Every morning and every night, he would declare, "I am wanted, I am valued. The perfect position is seeking me as eagerly as I seek it. Employers recognize my experience as an asset. My age is my advantage." 3 weeks. That's all it took. 3 weeks of faithful mental rehearsal, and he received not one but 2 job offers, both better than positions he'd applied for months earlier. What changed? Not the economy, not his resume, not even technically, his age. What changed was the inner conversation. He stopped auditioning for poverty and started rehearsing prosperity. Your words today are building your world tomorrow. Every complaint is a prayer for more problems. Every declaration of impossibility is an instruction to your subconscious to prove you right. So I ask you now, with everything we've covered, with everything you now understand about mental rehearsal and subconscious law, what story will you tell yourself tonight before sleep? What role will you practice when you close your eyes? The stage is yours. The spotlight is waiting, and your subconscious is the most devoted audience you'll ever have. It believes every word, accepts every scene, and works tirelessly to make your inner performance your outer reality. Rehearse wisely, my friend, because tomorrow's world is being built by today's inner conversation. The curtain never really falls. It simply rises again on the reality you've been practicing all along.